Thanks, Len. And just a heads up, my internet connection is a bit unstable right now, so please feel free to jump in, anyone, if you suddenly can't hear me, and we'll fix that. But my name is Stella Jordan. I'm the Public Engagement Program Manager at the Boston Region MPO. And I'll just walk us through some housekeeping to get our meeting started today. So we can go on to the next slide. I'll read our notice of non-discrimination. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.bonmpo.org/mpo_discrimination. Our accessibility statement. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards, and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, or if you have any technical difficulties, please contact me, Stella Jordan of MPO staff, or one of our other staff members on the call. You can email me at sjordan@btps.org, or call me at 857-702-3675, or you can chat us via the Zoom chat box. And with that, getting ahead of myself, some guidelines for the meeting. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation if you haven't done so already. You may mute and unmute yourselves during this call, but please remain muted unless you're actively speaking. And to participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. You can find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raised hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar, and the chair will call on you. And if you're joining on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. And with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Len, for introductions.
Thank you, Stella. So yeah, I think we have time, to do a quick round of introductions here. We don't have too many people at the meeting, and then I see some names I don't recognize. So it'll be nice to just get a brief, intro. So I'll call your name, and you can just say, who you are, and what your association, your affiliation. So let's see, Franny.
Hi, I'm Franny Osman, and I'm the outgoing vice chair of the organization. And I live in Acton, and I'm on the Lowell Regional Transit Authority board as the rider rep.
Thank you, Franny. Andy?
Good afternoon, everybody. Andy Weeker at the City of Cambridge. I'm the Transit Program Manager in the Community Development. That's the Planning Department.
Thank you, Andy. We have the Baltimore Metropolitan Council.
Hi, this is Monica Haynes Benketta from Baltimore. Hello. I just wanted to sit in and see how y'all run your meeting. So thanks for streaming. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll maybe have to return the favor sometime. So let's see, Benjamin.
My name is Ben Coulomb. I am the new grants assistant for the MWRTA. I have Joy Glenn, who's a grants manager here next to me. It's good to see everybody. Good to meet everyone. And I look forward to the meeting.
Yeah, thank you, and enjoy. Yeah, Ethan.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ethan LaPointe. I'm the Transportation Improvement Program Manager with the Boston Region MPO.
Great, thank you. And Fatemeh.
Hello, I'm Fatima, and I'm actually a PhD student at Northeastern University studying transportation engineering. Yeah,
Great.
I'm here to.
Great, thanks for joining us. Nice. All right. Hannah.
Hi, everyone. Hannah Switlikowski, MBTA Advisory Board. I apologize in advance. I can actually really only stay for about 15 minutes today, but I will definitely look at the minutes and always appreciate the work that you, Len, and your committee does.
Well, thank you, Hannah. And then there's the YouTube, which you can always watch at 2x. So great. John,
John McQueen, Walk, Massachusetts.
thank you, John. Kyle,
Hello, Kyle Casiglio with the Boston Region MPO.
thank you, Kyle. Sean,
Sean Rourke, the Manager of Communications and Engagement at the Boston Region MPO.
thank you, Sean. Stephen,
Steve Olar from Westwood, and I represent the Trek subregion, non-voting member.
thank you, Steve. Chia,
I'm Gia. I'm the Public Engagement Coordinator at the Boston Region MPO.
great, thank you, Chia. So we met Stella, and I'm Leonard Diggins, being chair, and I am a member of the MBTA Right Oversight Committee. So that takes care of the introductions, and now I'll just check to see if there are any public comments. You can just raise your hand electronically, and that will help because I can't see every window. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. So we'll move on to approval of the September meeting minutes. And so if there are any comments, questions, corrections, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve in a second.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Andy. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second,
Oh, nice.
it is a tie.
It is a tie, so we
Give
have a.
Give it to Franny.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you. So we have a motion by Andy Reeker to approve minutes and a second by Franny Osmond. We'll do a verbal vote, please, Stella.
Len Diggins,
Yes.
Franny Osmond.
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. Andy Reeker,
Yes.
John McQueen.
Yes.
All right, that is all of the voting members that I see. Please raise your hand if I did not catch you, but I believe that calls the roll and the motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to elections, which is a different kind of election this time. And so I'll now turn it over to Stella to conduct elections.
Yeah, so for all
We are losing your audio, Stella. I know you said you had unstable internet. Maybe if you turn off your video, it might help the audio. Is she frozen? She's looking frozen to me, but then it could be me.
She might need to leave and come back to fix it.
Okay, sure. Well, we have time, so we can let her come back. Otherwise, we can just move on to another part of the agenda and then swing back around to the elections. Part we're doing elections early because they are kind of pro forma at this point, and we just wanted to make sure that we had everyone here who wanted to vote in case they had to leave early. So it won't be a problem if we move on to, although I think Stella was going to present on the community planning lab. So we really might have to wait until she comes back. I think she has the item after that too, the restructuring. So if we really get stuck, I think we'll just pull Kyle, on his presentation up to next. So we'll give 3 minutes. Probably shoot this. So. Get some tea, get some water, check some email.
What was the problem with voting, did you say?
Oh, it's not a problem. Oh, well,
I mean, do we
actually,
have-
Stella was going to conduct the elections.
Oh,
So-
and she got disconnected. Okay.
Right.
Okay, I missed that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Thanks.
No problem.
If Stella doesn't make it back, oh, it looks like she's on again. I was gonna say, I could probably take a stab at.
Sure.
I'm so sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure can. No problem.
Okay. I'm
No
sorry
problem.
about that. My connection just dropped.
Don't worry. it's okay.
I was in the middle of saying that I believe the majority of voting members have cast their votes. And I have unanimous votes for Len for chair and Andy for vice chair. So I believe that settles the elections, and congratulations to you both. Thank you both for your statement, which is posted to the calendar, and looking forward to working with you both.
You're welcome.
Did-
And yes.
Did you get all of them online? Did you get all? Because I don't remember voting, but I mean, I thought we should still allow people who didn't vote yet to vote, even if the votes you got so far were enough.
Well, I'm inclined to agree. Although I'm
Yeah.
not conducting the election, so I'll defer to Stella. so
If you haven't, as I mentioned, if you haven't had the chance to vote yet, you can take a moment to do so now. And we've
Okay.
collected 6 out of 8 voting members so far. So if you haven't
So-
voted, the link should be at the top of your inbox from an email from myself.
Ah, okay, I see it now.
So I'm not going to say anything, Stella. I'm not going to say anything more until you turn it back over to me, just in case you're waiting for me to say something.
I think I just voted twice. Once without realizing you were supposed to touch the people. Anyway,
Oh, scandal. Election fraud at the Advisory Council for Boston Region MPO.
so you can
Just do that.
disregard an empty vote.
Just do that on
Well-
November 5th.
Oh no, just try.
Well, you're gonna get us in trouble. You get us in trouble there, Mr. McQueen. Don't go saying things like that. All righty. Like I said, I'll wait until Jill still tells me to do something.
Yeah, I think so. With counting one of the votes that Franny cast, up to, I believe you said, we have 7 out of 8 voting members having voted, and the results are unanimous for Len for chair and Andy for vice chair. So I think that can conclude the elections process unless anyone else has any questions or comments.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so I think it's the duty of a chair to put the vice chair on the spot as soon as the vice chair gets elected. So, Mr. Reeker, you want to say anything?
Nothing other than thank you. Obviously, this is a moment of transition. So I think Len and I are both trying to be as open as possible. And I think we're both up to hearing from folks individually if there's any questions. Obviously, transition from A to B is not hard from being at A or B, but it's the in-between. So I think that's our role for the next few months until we kind of know what's going to happen next. So happy to be there as a sounding board or another kind of thought partner to anybody who's here.
And I do want to thank Andy for stepping up, because even before, I knew about the restructuring. I had asked Andy if he would be willing to do this, and I know that Andy has a lot going on in Cambridge. Cambridge is a busy municipality to start with. And I think there are some externalities at his workplace that's making it even more challenging, as most workplaces are having now. It's just really finding the people to do the work. I mean, so thank you, Andy, and thank you all. You know, as you know, I mean, I very much enjoy this. I have always been willing to step aside to let someone else do it and to work with them to get them up to speed has always been my goal. I mean, to work with the vice chair and get them to a point where they were able to just take over. You know, things are changing now, so it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. But it was never the case in my part that I didn't want to do this. It's more like I can let it go because it was always a desire to remain a part of the group and then work with whoever the next chair is. To help them in the transition and then be a contributing member the advisory council under their leadership. So I thank you once again for another partial term, and we'll see what happens. So with that, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the restructuring and the continued discussion about the restructuring. Or is it the community lab? I guess it's community lab. Thank you for flashing that. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So the community lab, and Stella, please take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, and sorry about that. I think we shuffled some things around, but yeah, I'm really excited to share with you guys the some of the takeaways from our pilot community planning lab program, which we held on September 20th. I know we've shared with you all quite a bit in the lead up to this about what the plans were and why we wanted to do it. And you as members provided some really valuable insight into what areas we should be focusing on and how we should be communicating some of the MPO's work to folks who are new to the process. So we really appreciate that. And I'll just jump right in. So go to the next slide, please, Gia. So as I mentioned, we held the pilot program on September 20th. It was a full day program held in person at our offices at the State Transportation Building. We provided a stipend for each participant and food. We had 5 participants join us representing community-based organizations and advocacy organizations. Their work focused on a range of topic areas from climate resilience to accessibility to community development. And we really sought to invite organizations to participate in this program who are not currently deeply involved in the MPO's work, have not engaged with us previously very much, or represent communities and perspectives that really are not well represented right now in our planning process. So we thought we had a really successful group, and I just listed them out there. We'd be happy to provide more information about how we selected folks, but essentially we cast a pretty wide net and heard back from these 5, and it was a really great group. If we go on to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about what we actually did with them. So again, sort of the overarching goal of this community planning lab was really to provide a deep dive into the ins and outs of the regional transportation planning and decision-making process and the MPO's work, to provide really easily accessible and understandable information about specifically not just what the work is, but really how you as an advocate or as a community member can engage and effectively influence the work and advocate for issues in your communities. So that was our goal. And we built in a lot of interactive activities throughout the day and throughout the program to highlight those things. And we go on to the next slide. Some of those activities focused on areas including the LRTP, the TIP, active transportation, and climate resilience. I'll talk about each of those things a little bit more, but I'll just kind of run through like how we started the day and how it proceeded, so you get a sense of how the pilot went. So after we did some introductions and an icebreaker, we headed into a presentation about the history of MPOs and their function and purpose. Most of our participants, again, were not super familiar with the MPO and our planning process coming into the program, so we felt it was really important to sort of set that foundation for the day right up front. and focusing on the history as we got into why MPOs exist and what we do. I think was a really helpful way to do that. And then to dive into the discussion about the LRTP, we designed 3 activities, which included identifying needs and opportunities using a collaborative mapping platform. An example of that is on the slide. We also did an activity brainstorming goals and action steps based on our current LRTP Destination 2050's vision, goals, and objectives. And then we also did an activity about funding transportation priorities using a polling platform. So in combination, these activities kind of helped give a sense, I think, of the actual elements in the LRTP development process. And they provided helpful takeaways for us as staff also as we plan more public engagement for the next LRTP that's currently being developed. If we go on to the next slide, please. The next activity we did, which I think was a highlight, certainly for us as staff, was a TIP scenario role-playing activity. I think I previewed this when I first talked about how we were developing the curriculum a couple of months ago, but we have some examples of the materials we used on the screen here. It turned out a really fun and engaging activity. Essentially, we designed a mock board meeting where participants played different board members who were trying to reach a consensus about a funding scenario. So each character represented a different municipality, organization, or agency with varying priorities, which we sort of listed out for them up front. We did make up these members and municipalities and projects based on some of our real life experience. So just to not be directly linked to exactly the way things are right now, but based in some reality. And just like at a real board meeting, we had staff present the projects that were up for consideration and a couple of baseline preliminary scenarios for funding those projects. And then the participants who were playing board members then had a discussion and modified the scenarios and discussed project funding trade-offs until they didn't totally reach a consensus, but they did take a vote and they voted to fund a specific scenario. And participants, I think, really got a feel through this activity for how decisions about project funding are actually made at the MPO, what trade-offs are involved, between making decisions about whether or not to fund specific projects in a given year, and then how the MPO strives to balance different perspectives and priorities throughout the TIP process. And I think people were really engaged in that activity. And then the next slide, we also, to end the day, had participants choose whether to participate in one of 2 topic-focused breakout sessions. So these were on active transportation or resilience. And so we brought in staff who are experts in these 2 areas to give an overview of the MPO's work in each area and again, how it sort of ties back to the long-range planning and project funding that we discussed earlier in the day. And then during these sessions, staff heard about what key issues and priorities participants wanted to elevate in their communities. And we talked through several examples of infrastructure projects and elements of projects that address issues that folks raised. The discussions really focused in the end on concrete opportunities to engage with resilience and active transportation planning work at the regional level and effectively advocate for outcomes that address local issues. Next slide, please. And so just to wrap up the day after all of those activities, we did have sort of initial reflection conversation with participants to get some of their thoughts and feedback right away on how they felt the day went and what they learned. Some highlights from that discussion: participants agreed that having a small cohort, there were only 5 members in this group, and a one-day program worked out really well for them. They felt that it was easier to commit to one full day rather than chunks of time across multiple days or weeks. And they felt that the interactive activities were much more engaging than being presented at with information. Not a surprise, but reinforcing for us, I think that it's so important to build in a lot of interactivity throughout a full day like this. And then the hands-on and interactive methods that we used, again, I think they were just really helpful for folks to understand the complexities of the MPO's planning process. I don't think anyone left, a full expert in planning, but I think the activities and the style of activities that we did really helped participants come away from the day feeling like they knew more than when they started, and they had a sense of what they could do next and how they could get more involved in a really meaningful way. So that was really great to hear, and we got some great feedback that folks felt that the program was really collaborative and engaging. We also sent out a formal online post-program survey. We really want to dig into folks' feelings on each activity a little bit more and see what we can fine tune and really hopefully get some good constructive feedback as we go about planning for future iterations of this program. So some of the questions that we asked in that survey include how people feel like their understanding of how to engage with the planning process has changed, the effectiveness of the various activities that we did, and providing some feedback on some of the materials that we provided to them during the day. And really with a focus towards, again, how we can continue to improve our engagement, our educational efforts, and future years and versions of this program. And as staff, I just want to also say we found the experience of facilitating this educational program to be incredibly valuable. We got to deepen and develop new relationships with stakeholders that several of them we had never talked to before, and learn more about their work as well. We talked a lot about how we can support each other's efforts and start to break down some of the engagement barriers that some of these communities represented face by sharing information and providing clarity around some of the complexities and the nuances of the planning process. So I think we still have a long way to go, but this was a really encouraging first step towards building out this type of educational work for us. And we're really excited to continue bringing in and finalizing the feedback that we're getting and really start digging in and planning future iterations of the program. And I believe that's all I have. I welcome any questions, comments from you all. Oh, sorry, I had one more slide. Yes. Oh, yeah. So on our end as well, we're working on kind of formally documenting how this program went. If nothing else, like that'll be super helpful for ourselves as we plan future iterations. So we're making ourselves some recommendations for how we can improve and build upon this work. Whether there are more topics that we can cover in planning and MPO work beyond the topics that we were able to cover during this pilot program, whether there are new activities that we can develop, and how we can expand participation, representation, and expand this program to even more folks. So we're also incorporating the takeaways into other engagement efforts, including the development of a public engagement plan and engagement guidebook, which I've talked to this group about before, and also in terms of future onboarding of new advisory council members. I think there are some really valuable lessons that we can learn around what types of education are most effective in getting people up to speed quickly on the MPO planning process. And I believe that is the end of my presentation. So I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Stella. So hands up if you have any questions or comments. Electronic hands, please. All right. Well, yeah, it seems like a pretty thorough summary there. You got a good sense of what you did, and what your take home. Oh, I'm sorry, Andy?
Yeah, I guess for Stella or other folks on the CTPS staff who participated, I guess the question that I have is, would you repeat this in the future with the other sets of community-based organizations? Do you feel it seems like very positive reaction from the folks that participated? So, is this kind of maybe a model that you all would consider for additional organizations to participate in?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think this is something that we really want to keep building upon. As I said, the results, even the preliminary results that we've gotten have been really encouraging from the folks that we had participate in the pilot. And I think as we develop those recommendations for ourselves in terms of next steps, that'll include thinking about what other types of organizations we can engage. There are certainly plenty of community-based organizations and local groups out there that I think we'd love to have come and participate in this type of program. And I think we could, even further refine that in terms of having groups for like youth, for example, and other types of stakeholders specifically. So I think there's definitely a lot of momentum to keep thinking about this and keep expanding it. And we're really excited about that.
And then just as a follow-up, on the staff side of things, was it like a doable type of thing? I'm actually just trying to imagine, could a city do this or a municipality if they're interested in something like this, to be able to invite in maybe folks that haven't participated before? Did it seem like a doable level of effort for of course, kind of maybe a sprint to get this done and make people, connected with people, but on the actual like logistical feasibility of it, did it seem to be like a sustainable type of effort here?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for us, it was definitely doable. I mean, it wasn't a small amount of effort by any means, but I think as we get more comfortable doing things like this, we'll be able to do it a lot faster and more easily as well. And certainly, I think building upon a lot of the materials that we already created, which we'd be happy to share with other stakeholders as well, I think. But yeah, I think it requires a commitment to staffing, and not just from the engagement side of things, but we brought in a lot of other folks. Ethan came and talked about the TIP and participated in the role-playing activity, and we had other staff members involved in some of the discussions about specific work. So I think that was one thing that we just wanted to be conscious of too, is that it does require, not just a lot of commitment and concerted effort from the engagement team, but also time and effort from other folks. But I think if that's something that an entity is willing to put forward and do, I think we're already seeing and thinking that the benefits have been really great. And so I think it definitely yields like a strong return on your investment, I'd say.
Thank you, Annie. Thanks, Stella. Anyone else? So you said that so how many groups did you outreach to?
Let's see. I think we probably reached out to 10 or so before we narrowed down to these 5. I don't have the exact numbers and contacts in front of me right now. Maybe Gia or Sean, if you want to jump in as well and correct me.
No, just roughly. So you say you reached out to about 10?
10 to 15 probably. And since we were on kind of a tight timeline, we didn't ask people to apply. We reached out proactively to them. So we were sort of running down a list of potential organizations and just moving on when we didn't hear from people.
Okay, gotcha. Franny?
Yeah, when we were thinking, Stella, when we were designing like questions to ask people about why they used to participate, who's participating now, one of the things we were talking about was trying to really define who do we want to be on RTAC, and who should it include. And so in this, I might have missed this, but you reached out to organizations, but then there's like individuals from towns or what is the set of that type of person? And is that part of the process as you redesign, is thinking about who should be on RTAC? Or do you have that sort of set of people and organizations in your mind? You know, it should be people from municipalities, you know, there's somebody from representing each MAPC subregion. You know, what is the set of those things?
Yeah, thanks, Franny. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I just realized because you reached out to organizations here, but what are those other groups or type of units that you could have been reaching out to or would in the future? Yeah, that's all one
Yes.
question.
Yes, good question. Okay. So yeah, for this community planning lab pilot program, we knew that we wanted to keep it small. And so we put some parameters around who we were reaching out to off the bat, just for the purposes of this pilot, and not to say that we didn't want to reach other people or other types of stakeholders, but I think that will come in as we continue to expand this work. But for this, our sort of parameters or the criteria that we were thinking about were community-based organizations specifically. We wanted to reach and bring in sort of established entities that were working within a community on a specific issue. And we wanted to reach community-based organizations and advocacy groups that had not previously been connected with the MPO or had not previously had a high level of participation in our work or communication with us, and or groups who represented communities or types of stakeholders, like, you know, people with limited English proficiency, for example, who currently are not as well represented in the regional transportation planning process in general. So those were kind of our criteria just for the pilot. Again, this was sort of to make sure that folks in the room represented established entities and sort of came in with their own established goals for the day based on what, you know, the organizations that they're affiliated with. But I think in the future, as we expand this, and certainly in the context of a new RTAC membership, we really do want to think about other stakeholder types as well. And for the community planning lab pilot, you know, I think I mentioned we'd want to expand to other types of organizations, other types of groups who we're not well connected with currently. I could see us doing a version with municipal staff or with, you know, youth groups or something like that. I think that that'll all sort of be filtered into the recommendations that we put together for those next steps. And then in the context of RTAC, I think, yes, the short answer, and we can talk more about this in the next discussion on the agenda as well, but I think we really want to focus on having a really robust and diverse group of members who represent really a wide variety of stakeholders and entities and communities, types of communities throughout our region. So I think part of that will be through thinking through a little bit more, as you mentioned, Franny, like we want to make sure that we have, you know, at least X amount of municipalities and at least X amount of community-based organizations. We want to make sure that there's space for interested members of the public, et cetera. So that's definitely something that will be worked out in the next steps to that restructuring effort that we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's really good. And you can also look at the lists from years ago. You know, I remember people with disabilities and people from a bus company, and there was such a variety of people who used to come when we met in person. And so when you're going through that process, to look at that list of those sign-in lists from 10 years ago, you know, would be helpful.
Thank you, Franny. So yeah, we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda. My questions were kind of leading into that next item because I wanted to get a sense of what kind of interest there was. But from the way that the pilot members were selected, there wasn't that kind of input. So let's just move on to the next item, so that you can at least interact as much as you'd like, Stella, before you need to leave. So restructuring. Stella.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so that was a good segue actually. So we discussed this and Tegan presented this plan initially at our last meeting on September 11th. At that meeting, we talked about the background of this restructuring idea and the intended outcomes, which include a broader, more diverse and representative membership, as we were just talking about, creating closer connections to the MPO's public engagement program and practices, and creating closer connections as well to really impact the MPO's planning and decision-making process. And so the elements of the restructuring that we'll be implementing, which I'll talk more about, the implementation specifically today, are based on a lot of research into peer MPO advisory bodies and best practices and engagement, and haven't been informed by a lot of discussion so far. So I'll just dive right in and go to the next slide, please, Gia. So the restructuring plan is to introduce a new membership process, meeting plan and structure, and new governance structure. Again, this was presented on in more detail. I'm not going to go through all of the detail that Tegan provided at the last meeting, but that's available in the meeting recording on a calendar. If you're curious, the elements that will be a part of this restructuring are to wind down the current structure of the advisory council after our next meeting in November. And then during a gap between the wind down of the existing structure and the launch of a new structure, staff will work on finalizing and initiating the restructuring plan and ultimately launching a new advisory council group. And that will include having a new membership process for the group, which we were just talking about a little bit, and we'll be happy to address further in the discussion here. New members and a new meeting plan based on that new group, and a new governance structure. We'll go on to the next slide. So focusing on the next steps towards this restructuring and implementation. At our last meeting, we talked about the details of this plan. At our current meeting, we're talking a little bit more about the specific elements of implementation and sort of the timing. In November, as I mentioned, will be sort of a final wind down of the current advisory structure. We'll have celebrations of our accomplishments and our efforts, and you all as members, the contributions that you've made over the many years that you've been involved. And we'll also talk about the engagement guidebook, because we feel it's really helpful to get your input on that as we finalize that product. And then throughout the end of this calendar year into early 2025, as I mentioned, staff will be finalizing the plans for restructuring, finalizing all of the details around the membership structure, the application process. And then in early 2025, spring, February, March, we aim to release applications and start soliciting new members, bringing new members on board and putting together that meeting plan. And so ultimately hoping to launch the new group in spring of 2025. Slide, please. Yes, transition period, December through March. And during that transition period, basically after our November meeting until the spring, I mentioned that staff will be finalizing that restructuring process. And really the key elements there are putting together and finalizing an application and membership structure. We've already done some thinking about this, but we'll really be finalizing it, and it'll be informed by a lot of the best practices that we've seen through our peer research and engagement research. And we'll be putting together a meetings work plan for the new group to have in place, to make sure that we're connecting their discussions right off the bat with key elements of the MPO planning process, We'll be putting together an incentives plans that we can hopefully provide incentives or stipends to members to make sure that folks don't face barriers to participating in this group. And we'll, of course, be incorporating learnings, many of which I just talked about from the Community Planning Lab, in terms of specifically how we talk about some of our work to folks that are new to it. Next slide, please. And so just to give a sense of concretely sort of what you as members, current members of the Advisory Council can expect during this transition process. As I mentioned in November, we'd love to discuss and finalize the public engagement guidebook with you. We will have several one-on-one or small group debriefs. We'd really like to take some time and hear about your experience on the Advisory Council as a member, and your perceptions of public engagement at the MPO. So I know Len and Andy both mentioned that they'd love to talk to folks one-on-one. This is just an open call as well, that staff would really like to make those connections as well, and hear from you all and get some of your insights as we wind down the current membership.
Sorry
So
to interrupt,
look out-
Stella. Sorry
yeah,
to
go
interrupt.
ahead.
I just want to be clear. It's not that we are saying to folks, meaning that we want to have one-on-ones with you. We just are making it clear that if you want to have a one-on-one or with us, meaning we're open to those conversations, but we're not inviting you to have those
Oh, yes.
conversations. Okay, we're just making it clear that we're available. This is so.
Thank you. Thank you for
yeah,
clarifying. And
yeah.
and yes,
Sure. No problem.
likewise,
Yeah.
there's no we're not, these aren't mandatory, but we'd really love to just talk to each of you more throughout this transition process and hear more about what your experience has been. So you can look out for more information from me on that in the coming weeks. And then of course we will keep you all updated as we go through this transition process and as we approach the launch of the new group. Next slide, please. And I'll just reiterate as well, because you all just elected Len and Andy, that what that means in terms of Advisory Council leadership is that throughout this transition period until the restructuring process is complete, the chair and vice chair of RTAC will continue to represent the Advisory Council at MPO board meetings and committee meetings as they have been doing, and also help us as staff really kind of generate ideas and talk through some of the challenges and opportunities involved in some of these restructuring efforts and activities. And then once launched, the new group, the new Advisory Council group, would have a role in electing their next leadership. And we go to the next slide. Here, I'd like to pass it to Tegan, if you want to talk a little bit more about specifically what we're thinking about for November.
Sure, thanks, Stella. And hi, everyone. I've been here for a good chunk of the meeting, and I was also really excited to hear Stella talk a little bit more with y'all about the Community Planning Lab results, which were pretty exciting. But back to all of you, I did want to take a moment before we chat about this particular element just to say how much I appreciate all of the work that you all have put into the Advisory Council. And what we want to do is talk about how we want to celebrate that. But for the moment, I just want to say those of you who are official members now, Len, Franny, John, Owen, and Fred, who I think you're here today, and I think maybe Anna Christina, John, Seward, and Skylar and Scott may not be here today. But I think the vast majority of you all were also on the Advisory Council for the 4 years that I was on the chair and on the council, which means a minimum of 9 years of service. And that's also probably a very small number for some of you who I think have been engaged longer. And that's, of course, those of you who are current members. We have a variety of other people who have attended pretty regularly over the last year or years before. And just to acknowledge some of those folks, our friends from the MWRTA are here today and have been here quite regularly. Steve Olenoff, I know you are here or were here. Yeah, there you are. and your past chair and has stayed involved. We've also had a number of other really interested folks engaging, like Susan Barrett from Lexington, Logan Casey from Marblehead, and many others. So I just want to make sure that I know I'm not covering everybody, but I just recognize how much work and time folks have put into not just time, but also sort of thought into playing the role that you play on this group or adjacent to this group to try to have input into that MPO process. And regardless of the transition, that input can continue. We're just working on sort of evolving forms of that. And there might be ways that we can talk to you on our one-on-ones about sort of the types of ways you want to stay engaged. That said, let's talk about celebrating. We'd really like the next meeting in November, which is the last formal meeting of this particular, iteration of the Advisory Council, which has been around for a number of years. That's really our time to celebrate what everyone has done and the accomplishments of this particular group. And we wanted to offer the opportunity to hold it as a hybrid event and talk about if there's anything that you would like to incorporate into celebration of the work that you've done. So that I can pause if that's okay, Len, and we can see if anybody wants to add anything or give us some input.
Sure, that's fine. And so Franny, I see your hand up.
Well, my hand was up with a question too in the previous part. So I'll wait on that. But in answer to Tegan's question, did you want comments from us on how we would want to celebrate together?
Yeah, it's if there's ideas you have.
Having something in person and having something to eat during it, even like a snack, would make for a celebration, I think, because we haven't been in person in a long time.
Well, we were thinking of offering a hybrid format so that those that couldn't make it in person could still participate as well. And that's something that we could look into and work on in the coming months. If that's
I can't help the hybrid participators.
You can't hug them, is that what you said?
No, I can't help them eat.
Oh, help them eat.
I don't have any input at this time. I mean, I'll let the people who are inclined to meet in person, give some input on that. I mean, I will try to make it. Wednesdays tend to be the second Wednesday of the month tends to be like my busiest day. Often followed by not actually. Usually we don't have the MPO meetings on that Thursday, but so yeah, it's just so I won't commit to being in person. I will commit to attending. So for those who want to be in person, by all means, please chime in. So Franny, is your hand back up? Or
yeah, it's still back on Stella's presentation about
fine.
the restructuring. I just wanted to but I wanted to let Tegan get her responses before I go to that.
Sure.
I mean, on this, and then we can go back to Stella.
Sure, man. And I guess my other question to Tegan would be, I mean, I would suggest maybe doing an electronic outreach meeting to members and if the staff is amenable to a different day and time, that might work for more people. Because I think what you'll want to do is maximize the number of people that you will have there, so that it just feels like a more vibrant event, So, but I leave that to you all because that's your space, and your time. But just suggestion. So, but I certainly will ask that staff lead this part of the process.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Now we'd be happy to reach out and to figure out what works. The other thing I'd say is that when we have it scheduled, when we normally would have it scheduled for next month, the annual meeting is actually the following day, the annual meeting of the MPO. Right. So that's another sort of bigger in-person type commitment. So it might make sense to consider how those relate. We just didn't want to go off and plan something without having at least this touch point, and we can have some electronic touch points as well.
Yeah, no, very much appreciate that. Thank you. So yeah, and before Franny chimes in, I just want to say that we talking about Andy and I representing the interim advisory council on the board. That's where I was really thinking about folks, or that's where I was making the offer to folks that if you want to talk with us about what's on the MPO agenda and things that are going on, even though you can always show up at an MPO meeting and interact as a public during the public comment part, if there's something that you would like to add, or just want to understand, I just want to kind of function in that interim capacity, as chair of the interim advisory council as I am now, that you can always just ask, and I'll tell you what I know, understand, and certainly take your input. So that's it. Thank you. Franny?
Yeah, what I was back on when Stella was talking about the restructuring. My memory is that way back for a while, anybody who was coming to these meetings was a member, was participating. We weren't that clear about like what's a member and who's just coming. And so everybody was just sitting around and giving input. And then there was at one point, I don't know, you know how sometimes certain personalities come up and then the group sort of shifts and says, oh, we need to make this more formal. At one point, for some reason, we changed it to you had to be at a certain number of meetings in a row in order to be at the table. Otherwise, you were around the table and you weren't a formal member. But before that, it felt more, either I didn't understand it or it was more informal, that anybody who showed up was participating in the process fully. And so as we restructure, I think it would be really important to not just look at the recent methods. That's why I keep encouraging us to talk to people who were here 10, 15 years ago. At the same time, we are in the present, and moving forward into the future is more important than focusing on what was going on 10 or 15 years ago. But there still is some learning from talking to people about what was going and how they were participating at that time that we can bring into it.
And a quick question. When did you start participating on the advisory council?
God. I feel like it was like, I was a select board member from 2014 to 2017, but it was before that when somebody was leaving her role on the select board that she started handing it to me. So it might have been in the late 2000s or early to 2010 to 2014, somewhere in there. I can't remember.
Yeah, okay, all right. Because then
I was first participating as representing the
gotcha.
the Magic subregion. They needed somebody to represent the Magic subregion to here.
All right. So Tegan?
Yeah, I think I can add also, Franny, to just from doing the historical look at this body and to some of the other examples to reflect on, is that when this was originally established, there's actually very, very formal assignment of roles. So individuals specifically from specific agencies or designees from agencies. So it's evolved quite a lot over time. And I talked a little bit about this last time, but some of the other things that evolved is that we also have a lot more ways now for members of the public to be able to sort of, or people who are engaged, to come to the table on a regular basis in a way that when our tech maybe was more informal and sort of anybody at the table participated, maybe more than, well, I know more than we had then. And so there's all these different kind of elements to think about and consider as we move forward. But I also agree with you, we're moving forward, right, with the context we have now. So I appreciate you bringing up those examples. It's really important to realize that where we are now is not where we've always been and to sort of think about that.
Yeah, I would just add, Franny, definitely, I think that's part of where we're hoping to have these one-on-ones or group meetings with current members to really dig into some of your experiences, you know, sometimes going back many, many years. I think it does have really valuable insights for us as we continue to progress. But definitely, as Tegan mentioned, you know, this is not the only space for people to engage either formally or informally with the MPO. And I think we'll certainly have many other spaces that are less formal than the advisory council, even as it is now, in addition to doing this restructuring. And certainly still meetings will be open to the public as well.
Steve?
Yes, Steve Olanoff from Trick. We were never that informal, and everyone could participate and was welcome to participate, but the voting members were only people who first had attended and then were voted in after they were showing enough consistent attendance that they would stay. And on the other end, they were supposed to have been kicked off if they didn't attend enough, like 3 meetings a year or whatever it was, and that would vary about how many meetings they had to attend. And again, it was kind of lax about when the advisory council would do that, but that was the procedure way back then. I think that was the procedure right on through. It's just how often they got around to really accepting new members and how often they got around to really removing anyone who no longer showed up.
Thanks, Steve. So I'm going to say one thing, and then that'll be it, and we're going to move on to Kyle, because I think Kyle's presentation is just, I think it's really good and something that I think we have a strong interest in. I mean, my comment is that, and I'll be making this to the board, is that, I mean, I really think we need to have the staff needs to keep the board informed of what it's doing and what it's thinking, and I think the board needs to understand what the role, what relationship it wants to have with the advisory council, and yeah, I just feel that it's not really clear. We have an MOU that was intentionally vague with respect to the advisory council, and I think we should make sure that the board feels that it's getting the kind of council that it wants with the independence that is needed for the advisory council to really give the board advice, as opposed to thoughts and feelings. So that's it. And with that last word, we're going to move on to Cal, and we'll come back. Later on, we want, although out of respect, to the executive director, Tegan, I will ask you if you want to say anything else before we move on.
No, thank you, Len. I really, again, appreciate the ongoing conversation. I just want to express my appreciation. So we'll get working on our celebration.
Okay. You're welcome. Thank you for coming. So Kyle, I'm so excited about what you have to say, because I was really impressed by what I read. And I had another read of it, and I thought your presentation at the board meeting was great. And this is a case where as you know, the advisory council feeds into, we give input on what we like to see in the UPWPs. I think it's one way that the staff and the MPO really engages the advisory council a lot. I know that there's a feeling that we should be more involved with the planning process, and I would hope that the staff and the board doesn't sell itself short, because it has put a lot of effort into making sure the advisory council could make input. Ethan and then Matt Genova before him would come to advisory council meetings several times in the development of TIP to get our input. And the same is the case with the UPWP. And we definitely wanted this study, and so I think, once again, I think the results of the study are certainly interesting, and I'll let Kyle now tell us, about the study he did. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Len. So as you mentioned, my name is Kyle Casiglio. I'm a transportation planner with the Boston Region MPO on our multimodal planning and design team. This study, as Len was alluding to, was a UPWP funded study for fiscal year 2024. And today I'll be sharing the results of that. It's the best practices to prevent people from obstructing bike lanes with motor vehicles. The study comprised a literature review and case studies of interventions from cities across the US. Thus, it's not a analysis of bike lane obstruction in the Boston metropolitan area specifically. So any data or percentages that are mentioned only reflect our region if specifically said so. Also, I'm going to put a link in the chat to the full memo, which I definitely encourage you to check out. Don't be intimidated by the page count. It's a lot of appendices. So it's a pretty accessible report. If I get the next page, please. Next slide. So provide a little background on the study and why we decided to look at this. That we'll dig a little bit into the findings on who's causing the obstructions and why, what the impacts are on people using the bike lanes. Talk about some of the outreach that we did to both people who use bike lanes and people who are obstructing them. And then we'll dig into the meat of it, the interventions that we looked at in our recommendations for municipalities and for the MPO. Next slide, please. So this study was proposed to the MPO by a prior intern, and we opted to take it up because it really seemed to resonate with the experiences of the region. We've seen a large increase in daily bicycle trips over the past 5 years, due in large part to widespread expansion of bicycle infrastructure, the region's bike share system, Blue Bikes, as well as electric assisted options, making active mobility just much more accessible to people. However, unfortunately, with this increase in bicycle infrastructure, we've seen a proportionate increase in instances of it being obstructed for unintended uses and causing very real safety impacts on people trying to use them. Next slide, please. So who's causing these obstructions? Well, what we found is that this is primarily driven by people parking in the bike lane for commercial purposes. Commercial vehicles make up about 24% of vehicles on the road in an urban environment. But in a study assessing 5 major US cities, they found that they account for roughly 64% of minutes obstructing the bike lane. And relatedly, another study found that the only variable with a significant correlation to an obstructed bike lane was the density of commercial buildings in the area. So this is really something that's driven by demand. People making deliveries are far from the only offenders, of course. People parking their personal vehicles was the highest number of raw instances of bike lane obstruction, even if their obstructions were shorter. And oftentimes these take the form of a car door opening into a parking adjacent bike lane, which is a particularly sudden and dangerous form of obstruction. It's estimated to be the cause of up to 27% of all bicycle automobile collisions, which that number is a little bit hard to pin down because these collisions often don't make it into official databases. You're not going to find these in the impact portal. Utility and government maintenance work also often defaults to taking up the bike lane when they need space. And unlike when pedestrian infrastructure is obstructed, there's no requirement to provide accommodation. This is kind of based on the same dangerous assumption that we hear from a lot of drivers that, you know, they can just go around. What all of these things have in common is that it's just simply too easy to obstruct a bike lane, and it's too easy to get away with doing it. So the average person obstructing a bike lane does so for less than 5 minutes. So even if it gets reported, it's really difficult to actually catch and find the violator. Next slide, please. But as we all know, there are very real impacts to this behavior, and most importantly, the safety impact. So we found in both the literature and in our own outreach that over 85% of people using a bike lane will merge into the travel lane when they encounter an obstruction. It's a sudden maneuver that can put the person at great risk. And obstructed bike lane was found to be the single highest environmental cause of both bicycle pedestrian collisions at about 33% and bicycle motor vehicle collisions at about 10%, not including the type of dooring collisions that I mentioned earlier. So to avoid these safety impacts, people who are cycling will intentionally go out of their way to avoid areas they expect to be obstructed. Cyclists self-report as being willing to add anywhere between 12 to 17 minutes to their commute if they can guarantee that they'd have clear bicycle facilities for the length of their ride. So clearly it's not just as simple as just go around. And what these two things combine to do is really depress ridership. So many people have a low risk threshold for cycling and quite reasonably want to feel safe and comfortable when they're moving around. If they can't have that, they're not going to ride a bicycle. So if we want mode shift and we want the welcoming and inviting transportation system that, you know, is described in MassDOT and other regional plans, then this is an issue that needs to be addressed. Next slide, please. Now, in addition to looking at the literature, we did some outreach to both people using the bike lanes and to commercial drivers, both gig workers and legacy carrier employees like the post office and UPS. Next slide. So for people using bike lanes, we put out a survey across the region and also did some in-person engagement at bicycle-related events. We got some really significant interest, and this was an issue people very much felt passionate about. We ended up getting a little bit over 1,100 responses, which was really great. And thank you to Stella, Gia, and the rest of the communications engagement team. The key takeaways here was about how ubiquitous they felt this problem was, and the lack of enforcement, or quite frankly, even interest in enforcement for those that are supposed to be responsible for it. Notably, we were interested in the rate at which these obstructions led to conflict between the person driving and the person biking, and we did find that to be very rare. So there isn't a lot of assault and violence resulting from this, which is good. Next slide, please. So for drivers, we did some outreach to Reddit communities for gig workers and legacy carriers, as well as dug into their archives for threads where bike lanes were discussed. Much of the response is not suitable for a family-friendly forum such as this, but I again encourage you to read the memo and dig into the appendices. It is all there. What we did find is that the availability of legal parking was the most commonly cited reason for parking in the bike lane. And there was universal agreement that this is an offense that they are highly unlikely to be caught and penalized for, either by the enforcement agencies or by their employers. There really seemed to be a lack of interest from both sides there. And finally, the majority of the response was the perceived lack of impact that they were having by doing this. So, of course, they can just go around. Next slide, please. So what do we do about it? Well, we turned up numerous interventions, and we don't have time to go through every single one of them, but they can generally be categorized into 3 groups: so design-based, enforcement-based, and policy-based. Next slide, please. So first, we'll look at design, which is probably the most straightforward approach, just physically prevent the obstructions from happening. Next slide, please. We're all familiar with the concept of a protected bike lane and the many ways that they can be implemented. You can see a few examples of types here. A protected bike lane we found is only about 25% as likely to be obstructed by someone parking a motor vehicle as a traditional unprotected bike lane. And that is more effective than any other singular intervention that we looked at. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, it is still not a silver bullet. These types of lanes still have entrances and exits that can be obstructed. Heavy work vehicles can hop over something like a low concrete barrier or just go right through flex posts. We also found that a protected bike lane, while it's significantly less likely to have a motor vehicle obstructing it, it's actually over 50% more likely to be obstructed by a pedestrian than traditional bike lanes, and is more likely to have bicyclists traveling in the opposite direction. Finally, of course, we have the reality in the greater Boston region of significant spatial constraints and the narrow roads we have in our area. Not every road can have a protected bike lane on it. Next slide, please. Thus, we also need to improve the way that we enforce bike lane rules. Next slide. And this is actually an area where we have some of the lowest hanging fruit. A lot of enforcement agencies that we looked at simply don't have policies that align with the responsibility of maintaining a bike lane. In the city of Philadelphia, for example, they give a 20-minute grace period for any type of parking violation. So even if an enforcement officer happens to be present and see the obstruction while it is happening, the vast majority of them are never going to get penalized because they're not parking there for more than 20 minutes. Most agencies don't have a bicycle unit either. People who are responsible for the enforcement of infrastructure really need to be using that infrastructure to understand it, to understand the problems with it, and the experiences of those who are using it every day. Many cities are also improving their data on where to prioritize through crowdsourcing data. A few cities, most notably New York and Houston, have programs for citizen enforcement for other types of parking violations, though not for bike lanes specifically at this time. Houston's program gives us the best case study on this. They've had a citizen enforcement of illegal parking in disabled spaces for 30 years with great success. And many of the arguments that are frequently posed against citizen enforcement, such as inciting violent confrontations, were exceptionally rare. Automated enforcement is another approach that can be taken here. Many cities have had a lot of success with bus-mounted cameras to protect bus lanes, and both New York City and the state of California, which have used these for a little while now, have actually recently moved to increase the scope of these cameras to start enforcing bike lanes as well. Though those programs are very new, so we don't have significant data on that yet, it's definitely something to monitor going forward. We do also have some local examples of bollard-mounted camera enforcement here in New England. Somerville has their safety stick program. We've seen a similar program in Bridgeport, Connecticut for a while as well. And both cities have seen enough success with those that they've expanded the programs, and we're seeing more cities take this up locally as well. Next slide, please. Enforcement, of course, comes with some of its own considerations. You know, are we doing it equitably? Are we ensuring public safety and accountability? How is privacy being protected for automated enforcement? And enforcement is also, of course, a reactive intervention to something that has already happened. And ideally, we want to prevent it from happening. We want to be proactive. Next slide, please. So our last category of policy interventions look to get at that underlying demand for curb space that's driving people to park illegally in the first place. Next slide. Most of this is aimed at commercial drivers, as they do represent the majority of time spent blocking a bike lane. How do we better manage urban freight? Well, we can get it done at night. We can get it in smaller vehicles, improve how we place and run our loading zones. For rideshare in dense environments, you know, can we concentrate that pickup and drop off in particular neighborhoods? You are quite likely familiar with this type of centralization of rideshare at airports. Logan Airport does this as well. But Boston actually and other cities are expanding this into neighborhood drop-off zones. This is something Boston recently piloted in the Fenway neighborhood that they saw great uptake with. And while they did see a little bit of confusion at first, as people get more exposure to it, they found that that started to go away and there was more predictability. There's also the classic market-based solution of simply charging market rate for parking. That'll open up parking spaces, and thus the drivers are telling us that they're parking in the bike lane because there's no legal parking. So why not give it to them? So mixing in the carrots of parking availability with the stick of better enforcement can really make the system work better for all road users. Next slide, please. Now, policy interventions, like everything we've talked about, are not on their own. As mentioned, we need both carrots and sticks if these are going to be effective. Also, these are primarily aimed at people driving commercial, and while that is far and away the largest source of obstruction, the demand for curb space is disaggregated into several different purposes. So we always need to be assessing to make sure that the policies we're implementing are being done so to actually target the needs of that street, that neighborhood, and we need to make sure that we're implementing them in an equitable fashion. We can't just be focusing on one particular area. Next slide, please. So these recommendations here are just some of the highlights. We have a more robust list within the memo, but to the point before, we strongly recommend that there is no singular approach to be relied on alone. In the short term, these generally focus on some of the more low-hanging fruit and actions that support some of the bigger, longer-term interventions. This is developing tools, materials, etc., inventorying our loading zones, studying our metered parking, looking for opportunities. Next slide, please. In the longer term, there are some great interventions we can make that will not only have incredible effects for our bicycle infrastructure, but really our transportation system in general, getting everybody moving more efficiently. All these things are already being done here in the United States by our peer cities, and we have a lot of great examples to work off of. So fortunately, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Next slide. And that concludes my presentation, and would love to hear any questions, thoughts, comments.
Thank you, Kyle. And so, hands up, folks. Questions, comments? Gonna do the participants, so. Okay, John McQueen.
Hi.
And then Andy.
Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Oh, thank you. Kyle, very well done. Thank you. Because I remember this being offered back, was it April or fourth quarter of 2023. So I'm glad it got pushed forward. Just a question. Could you expand on the pedestrian incursions, let's say, or contributions to the problem? Was this jaywalking, or was it just normal street crossing that was actually legal that was misinterpreted, perhaps by the cyclist as being inappropriate.
Yeah, so we were primarily focused on motor vehicles, so I didn't look into the pedestrian question too deeply. The studies that did mention pedestrians that we looked at, basically what it was saying is when the bike lane's protected, pedestrians feel more comfortable popping kind of in and out of the bike lane to go around someone, to position themselves to cross the street mid-block. It is certainly something that I would say is probably not as big of a concern because a pedestrian is much more flexible than a motor vehicle. But it is just something to take into consideration. And anecdotally, I mean, it's something we see right outside of our office all the time, along the Boston Common Bikeway.
Thank you.
Anything else, John? Later? Okay. Maybe later, maybe. So, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I think the situation that I imagine, just kind of responding to what John said, is, you know, sometimes it depends on the location too, right? Sometimes, especially where you have stuff on the sidewalk level, I've definitely noticed that in Cambridge, you just have all manner of things happening in the dedicated bike space that doesn't necessarily need to happen there, including people walking sometimes. They don't know that it's actually a dedicated bike space or other thing like that. That's not an uncommon thing, but like Kyle said, right, the risks to that kind of interaction are very different in terms of traffic safety as to a vehicle pedestrian or a vehicle cyclist kind of interaction where the vulnerable road user is very much, you know, potentially threatened in a very different way to those kind of interactions. So that's kind of what I was thinking when you were talking about that, but it sounds like you had a little bit more commentary probably from other places about what that means. I think it was interesting that I just wanted to comment on the methodology of using the one using Reddit, but also to like being able to do kind of an online canvas of some of the local folks that maybe don't usually get canvassed as part of like a MPO study. So I really just wanted to say that's a pretty great use of stuff that's already happening, or a very low level of like, it's not low level of time in terms of like not meaningful. It's actually probably a quick survey that somebody filled out, but really does seem to paint a much more detailed picture about like what it is that people are experiencing. So I just wanted to comment on that kind of methodology. It's really, I think, giving some detail to some of the things that I think are the issues that you're raising. So I just wanted to say that looked great. In terms of beyond the recommendations, are there other kind of topics that would be worth taking a look, like in the way that you looked here about parking and bike lanes? Are there other topics as it relates to transportation? And I'm just kind of curious whether, Kyle, you kind of have a reaction of, you know, are there other topics that would deserve a similar treatment of doing this kind of research for kind of topics that are live and would definitely benefit from some research like this?
Sure. So one quick appendix to what I was saying before, runners are also a common feature in the bike lane. There is a big preference in the distance running community for asphalt surfaces as opposed to concrete. It's softer on the joints. So that's a common one that's seen in there as well. In terms of the like follow-up research or the other types of research that could benefit from a study like this, we are actually engaging this year in a e-cargo bike study to kind of look at how those can be better used to handle freight and small deliveries in urban areas. So that's a study we're really excited about moving forward. I think looking a little bit deeper, specifically into things like enforcement practices by cameras or by everyday people, and instances of that outside of necessarily just limiting ourselves to US programs, which tend to be very young and have less data than other peer countries, could be very helpful as well. And anytime that we can look at, you know, better integrating, I think, bicycling with like first last mile transit opportunities would be a great investment of our time as well.
Thanks. So yeah, I wanted to kind of piggyback on what Andy said about the methodology of looking at various online conversations and whatnot to get some insight. I like that a lot. Because it's one thing to survey people, and of course, you have to be careful when you're doing like the survey or looking at the online conversations. There's always like the universe. You're never really sure how much the sample matches the universe, but that's also the case when you're doing surveys. And I find when you survey people, they'll yes, you assume that you're telling the truth, but what people say about what they feel is sometimes different than what they do. And I'm just going to give a comparison. I hope maybe it's an analogy. I'm trying to be careful about using analogies as a proof point, but just to give you a sense. In economics, there's like this statistic that they report monthly called like consumer confidence. And so people are, I think, asked like, how do you feel about the economy? And then there's like consumer spending. And a lot of times those two things don't line up. And if I were to pick the one that I think matches reality, it'd be like consumer spending because of but anyways, so I like the just kind of going and kind of watching the conversations and getting a sense of what's going on there. But more so, I wanted to ask regarding the longer term recommendations. I don't recall the board really giving you any advice. Your presentation was late. And I was wondering, if you have a sense of what we might do long term, because a lot of the longer term ones had, I think, more of a regional planning aspect to it. And I think that would be good for us to pursue. As an MPO and all of the short-term ones, I think we should really look into seeing how we can encourage municipalities to do them as a MPO. So that's it.
Yeah, in terms of the longer term stuff, I really think the biggest one, and I know this is kind of short term, but it's for the MPO to really facilitate better data for the municipalities. That reporting tool, either developing one or there are some existing, as I mentioned in the memo, some existing third-party options to partner with. Because the biggest issue, I think a lot of municipalities, especially outside, the inner core, is there's not really an understanding of where is this happening, where's the biggest impact. So developing that kind of tool and then using that to inform, well, what would be the best type of interventions to address this? Can we do more? Can we solve this with design-based interventions on a couple corridors, or do we really need to look at a more robust type of enforcement policy, either strategically placing bollards or opening up some kind of citizen reporting tool that is then verified by actual enforcement agents?
Great, thank you. So I may circle back to find out what we're really thinking of doing and how we get to do it, how we plan on doing that. And so Fatima?
So it is a really interesting topic. And my question is about the protected bike lane. I think you also actually analyze those concrete, short box that separate the bike lane from the, vehicle lane, right? So are they
Yes.
any different from the flex posts? And besides, I think actually protected bike lanes, especially if they're, on a higher level compared to the vehicle lane, they will totally protect the bicycles and prevent the vehicles from parking on the bike lane. So did you study these differences in different kinds of bike lanes, protected bike lanes?
Excellent question. Thank you. So we found that there is no difference in level of obstruction based on the type of buffer, as long as there was some type of physical buffer, be it flex post, concrete, flower pots, whatever. It was a pretty consistent level of reduced likelihood. One big caveat to that is there was one big difference between bike lanes that were protected by vehicle parking versus other types. The rate of the bike lane being blocked was not any different, but there's a significant difference in cyclists' self-reported level of comfort with it, even if there's a buffer in between the cars, the parked cars, and the bike lane itself. So that was just something that was noticeable. To your point about the grade separation, I completely agree with that. We did not look at grade separated bike lanes in particular because there was just an assumption that yes, you're not going to be able to then hop the curb and obstruct the bike lane any more likely than one would with the sidewalk. And while that doesn't never happen, it's certainly not to the same extent as it happens with at grade with the street types of bike lanes. And we did find that just a paint buffer was not any better than having an unprotected bike lane in general.
Thank you.
Thanks. John?
Yeah, a few things. I guess I would encourage any extension of the physical buffers out there, given that they're proven to reduce incursions and they're able to increase safety. Because for one thing, you're not really realistically going to be able to get any other level of authority or enforcement. Quite honestly, the police departments are hugely understaffed right now and underfunded, and they just don't have the people and resources to devote to policing, bike lanes. Maybe in some communities they do, but it's going to be very inconsistent. And I guess a sure thing would be just eliminate the opportunity for double parking. Which brings me to another thing. This study is really more of a subset of the bigger issue previously of the future of the curb, and also one of double parking in general. And I think you could expand on this current direction, as well as expand to the future of the curb or double parking in general, what the impacts are of double parking in general, because that will involve a little bit more consistency of pedestrian involvement and impacts and things like that. But you could perhaps, with your end of it, bicycle end of it, you could collaborate with some of the very vocal Boston Bicycle Union or Mass Bike, etc., and maybe get about half a dozen of really offending locations, or that they could you could put in some expanded field work, let's say, of observation to really get more of a hands-on survey over a period of time in terms of the offenders, the types of offenders, and the frequency, things like that, that you can drill down a lot more in terms of what some of the infractions and potential solutions might be. That's just one, humble suggestion. But also expand again to the future of the curb, because that takes into account just that whole, the Ubers, the Grubhubs, and they may not individually represent more than 10, 15 minutes, but that same spot may be used within an hour by several. And so it can really have a larger impact on especially urban environment. So it's just to get more of a dimension, and the same true with the delivery services of Amazon and UPS, of what their impact is and how they contribute to an unsafe environment. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, John. So just circling back, I'm going to chew into the chair's report, because the highlight from the last meeting was really this. So I'll leave it at that. So what are going to be the possible next steps for the MPO, Kyle? Normally on these memos, the presenter doesn't ask the MPO and for feedback. I mean, with respect to future plans. But what do you think we can do or should do? Even if it's like take this conversation up, because I just feel that there's so many good recommendations here. I'd like to see the MPO kind of move forward with something. So I guess, do you have the ball, or are you waiting for the board to move the ball? I'm not articulating my question very well, partly due to low blood sugar, but I think you get my point.
No, I understand what you're asking. And with the big asterisk of I think some of these questions are a little bit above my pay grade necessarily, but
Sure.
I do think an obvious next step is to kind of find some municipalities to partner with on some like quick build interventions on particularly the short term recommendations. So to John's point before, we can really get some like good local data examples that we could maybe push out then to other municipalities as hey, look, we're trying this helped us reduce it by X amount, to really kind of pick up adoption on this. I again would love to see the MPO be taking the lead on helping with better data, but these are things that I would like and want to see. So.
Yeah. Well, let's see what we can figure out for the next UPWP, because as I recall, looks like there's a bicycle ped program, and as the executive director said, we're looking at doing like 5-year planning processes, for our various programs. So yeah, there's so much here that and has the potential to we can do a lot of stuff regionally, because that's our raison d'etre, right? And so let's I encourage you to do that. And you can then tell me, no, that's not my job. It's your job to advocate for that, and I'll get out there and advocate for it. So all right, thank you very, very much for all your time, and for your willingness to come and talk with us again. So good job, great job.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. So with that, folks, I'll move to old business, new business members items. Okay. And all righty. Well, then we're gonna get to adjourn a little early. So I will take a motion in a second to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Rieker. John, Franny, somebody give me a second.
I'll second.
Fred, thank you, Fred. So sorry, I missed your name there. So thank
That's
you,
all
Fred.
right.
And so with folks, we are adjourned, and hopefully see all of you in November. Bye.